I know there's so much to talk about, but I do want to bring in the one very important theme that I think you can speak very well on. And because we have a lot of parents, and including parents of kids who are in Agastya's programs, the major theme I want to deal with you or talk about for the next few minutes is what I would call Hindu parenting in a Hinduphobic world, where where the world is, we are surrounded by pervasive Hinduphobia, and everywhere from, we posted your analysis of a grade 6 textbook from California on our Twitter handle, and it just touched a raw nerve, right? You can see it starts right from, grade school textbooks all the way to where you are in academia to whatever sphere it is you're in. So this poses unique challenges for Hindus who want to raise their children not alienated from mainstream, but who are comfortable both with, working in the mainstream, and who are rooted in their identity, and who have, I would say, a right to feel equal to anybody else, right? So that's a theme. Maybe I can start with one question. So let's say, first question is, you recently wrote a Facebook post about the danger of parents thinking Hinduism is something children shouldn't even think about until their old age, when they're retired, 60s, 70s, that's when you get into spiritual Baba stuff and start reading Vedas and Upanishads. It has, no relevance for kids when they're growing up. So can you tell us more about this, general model of cultural extinction that you described in this Facebook post, and the dangers of thinking in that way?
I was very surprised when this post I wrote really got shared. It got like over 100 shares, and it's probably the most widely thing I wrote on Facebook ever, without a photo too. So, which is incredible. Well, the topic was very, grave in a sense. It suddenly occurred to me that this whole postponement, this kind of life planning we are doing as parents, for our children, particularly in terms of education and, civilizational survival, is really, really flawed. Because at least for 2 generations now, we are seeing this whole thing of parents sort of saying, no, the important thing right now is just studies and job, spirituality is for old age, And let me explain how I view this generationally. And again, my interest in looking at everything in terms of generational sociology comes from my first research project, which was on MTV in India in the 90s. And I realized there was so much going on about, parents and children and youth, and now I see it in a slightly bigger way. So the first generation of Indians who were born after colonialism, people slightly older than me, people who grew up, say, 50s to 70s, they got that from their parents, because economically they were very, very worried, They said, like, no, don't become a monk or sadhu, you must just study and become an engineer, get a job. Now, post-90s, there's a lot of prosperity. There's a huge middle class. First time, you have people who are out-earning their previous, their parents. So the generation which is parenting right now, right, which post-1980s born people, most of them are probably earning more than their parents ever did. So they actually have a lot more economic freedom to do things. But they have the same anxiety that our children should not be distracted from the very competitive realities of the world. So we should, push them away from asking us questions about spirituality or culture and philosophy. They have to focus on spelling bee and, math and science and get into engineering and get a job. And later in old age, if they want, they can do that stuff. So this is very flawed in my view because of 2 or 3 reasons. The first reason is children are craving meaning. And I know we have a question on that, so I'll just save that for later. Children are craving meaning, and by the time they're 20, if you've not given them the tools to make meaning from within our own philosophy, they're going to be so unhappy, they're going to be confused and led in all sorts of directions. Now, even if that doesn't happen, even if their childhood balvihar and loving family has given them a little bit of rooting, let's say they don't become unhappy, but they do take your advice and say, all right, yeah, I turned out okay. I go to temple once in a while. So I'm not going to force my kids. They can do this when they're old. So that attitude comes in. So this is basically what happens. So the children today, right, who've grown up with the idea that they needn't think about these issues till they're 60 years old, are going to grow up and become parents, and the entire lifespan of their parenting, right, from the time they're 30 to 60, they've brought up their children with zero exposure.
Right.
And, and then I wrote in my posts, and then you have somebody like Amartya Sen who boasts that, he grew up in a house with no puja and no murtis. And that explains everything you write now, my friend. So,
yes, thank you very much.
so I think this is like a 3-generational view that we all need to take. And so I think that's why I also said, start writing memoirs and start actively engaging in intergenerational, communication.
So I would add 2 things to that, Vamsee. That's great insight. One is, I would say the other problem that people are not realizing is Dharma is a lived experience. And living the experience starts from, the day you're conceived, before even you're born, right? And that's a way to also connect with your community, connect with other people, share in these ideas and dialogues and grow fulfilled as a person. And that cannot wait until you're in your 60s or 70s, because by the time, like you said, you're an empty shell. You really don't have anything that has given you a meaning or even connection with other people who shared your beliefs and shared your ideas, nor have you grown up with them, or even gone through the traditions, and that leads to basically a decline of our rituals, decline of celebrating our festivals, and this entire lived experience is lost, which gives you so much fulfillment, joy, and meaning as a human being. So that is one thing I want to point out. The second thing I want to point out is within traditional education, which is kind of what we are doing, there is tremendously valuable ways of becoming successful in Vyavharika, right? In your day-to-day life, in your grihasthashram, in your professional pursuits and careers. And that's some that we are bringing in through Agastya Gurukulam. For example, we did a great video on the importance of memorization, and we are teaching memorization and Sanskrit to kids. And it's incredible that my 5 and 7-year-old kids are now able to recite, so many sutras from Panini's grammar, Ashtadhyayi, and when they grow up, the grammar, learning that grammar becomes the foundation of understanding computer science, which gives them a competitive edge. So we are missing both on the practical and, applications of stuff that is in our traditional knowledge systems that can make us different and give us an advantage over others in the mainstream. And we are also missing the lived experience of a dharmic way of life, which is basically what Hinduism is. It gives you a template to live your life with. And if you haven't lived it right from the beginning, how will you suddenly get up in your 60s and start living that? It's not possible.
Absolutely true. Yeah. So after that, what you said is very relevant, because I think one of the questions that this leads up to is a question of meaning. And we had talked about that, and if we fail to give our children the exposure and the stories and the resources to generate meaning for the present day world, drawing on our own intellectual traditions like Ashtadhyayi and so on, they basically become passive consumers of meanings, that are coming from everywhere else. And I wanted to share one book actually, which I think would be very relevant. So I've just started reading this. It's called All Joy and No Fun, and it's sort of a social history of modern day American parenting. And she quotes Amy Chua, the Dragon Mom lady, quite a bit. I know that's a famous book. And, it's very interesting. She talks quite a bit about these high educated suburbs in America, like Sugar Land in Texas. And I'm sure there's a lot, in North Carolina, Silicon Valley, where all the engineers and doctors live. And she's particularly talking about the world that a lot of Indian American families are in. You know, you're very educated, you have good jobs, you're going to good schools, your children go to good schools, competing with Asians, you know, upper middle class whites, etc. Now, the interesting thing about this book is she talks about how parents basically really haven't invested the time or self-reflection to understand what are we preparing our children for. What is the, you know, I mean, ultimately everyone makes up their own reasons for living, but this particular generation, this particular class of parents, and I think Indians are also now in that category, are very, very historically new, because she says, look, till the 40s, you know, parenting really meant just passing on your traditional knowledge to your children, occupational knowledge, you know, maybe a little, maybe say to the 1850s, let's say, you know, in some countries, maybe 1950s in some countries. And that was it. You pass on your traditional skills, what your family or community was good at. And children, you know, got meaning from religion or the nation state and things like that. And then actually the other book is also very interesting about the question of meaning. And you might have seen this is a very popular bestseller. You know, Harari also is talking about, you know, meaning being the greatest thing that is needed. And what has happened now is Hindu parents, I think, have forgotten that being immersed or exposed to in the lived experience of Dharma, as you put it, because see, Dharma is not, for us, it's, you know, we copy the Sunday school model, but it doesn't really work that much for us. Right? Because we are not religion which has to be mugged and memorized and passed on to another generation. We don't have a book we are living by. You know, we have music, we have songs we're living by. In that sense, we are more like, I think, the Native Americans, right? Yeah. That, no,
we dance to our gods, we sing to our gods, we find, you know, Vedic chanting gives you meanings, Asatoma Sadgama gives you a way of living life, but it's in a verse.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's necessary. It'll give us a practical benefit, like you said, of improving our mental cognitive skills, and it will start making us think about the meaning of why we are here and how to make the world a better place.
Do you think this tendency of postponement among Hindu parents have made them passive? And the problem I find that, like, children grow up by the time they go to in their 20s and go to college, because they haven't been filled with that meaning. Well, now other people get the opportunity to fill meaning in their lives, and that can be, you know, very secular kind of consumerist attitude that you basically live by what you consume. And we see that, like, lots of Indians have a tendency for conspicuous consumption and flashing brands and all that, because really they're looking for anything to give a purpose to their life, right? And then, so from that consumerist spectrum, materialist success and, you know, rat race and all that, to the other end of the spectrum where they turn into, you know, foot soldiers for leftist activism, and, you know, just because they need some causes, and they become ripe for you know, propaganda of the kind that you identified, like Gandhi, King, Malala, without really understanding what it means.
You know, I'm actually glad children are becoming activists in school. I mean, not in school, but definitely in college, because it shows they care about something, that they are ready to go out and stand on a street and hold a sign. It's unfortunate that they have not got the resources to think through this particular signs they're holding, and how, you know, how much they're being co-opted by these globally destructive political forces. But I think the way to deal with that is, again, for parents to recognize one reality. You know, this is not the leftists, quote unquote, you know, who are lurking in some, you know, shady street corner, you know, trying to take your children on the wrong path. This is the big university you guys are spending money and sweat and tears to get your kids into. I mean, in fact, that's why I don't use the word leftist, because you're talking about the mainstream world. Right. What a few of us on the internet say leftists, and, you know, things like that. No, there's no leftists. This is the mainstream world. This is Harvard. This is MIT. This is UC Berkeley. All the Yale, Brown, the most desirable places. You know,
you're so right. We recently came to know of, I won't name the university, but a top university in America, renowned for engineering and computer science, where we know people who are doing research in computer science are doing it by these kind of motivations. and computer science and engineering students are being roped into this research that will eventually be used for, activism.
See, that's what I'm saying.
People who think that their kids are learning math and physics and computer science, they may be immune from it. They're not.
No, so see, we have to realize whoever is talking about Hinduphobia today, we may be talking about the truth, but many of us are the fringe. We are not the mainstream.
That's right.
Unfortunately, we don't say that. Many Hindus who are, fighting against Hinduphobia like to think that we are the mainstream. We have good jobs. We are engineers, doctors. We are model minority. We are not in Black Lives Matters. All of this is, disastrous for us.
Yeah.
Okay. So, to answer your question about activism, you have to understand, in 2016 November, all the schools in the Bay Area were empty because the students and teachers marched out, protesting against Donald Trump, when he won the election.
Wow.
So this is mainstream. You think your children, you're paying huge property taxes to be in a good school district. What they're doing. And in India, I know, every time there's a Hindu festival, the school goes into like mass performance of, disavowing Diwali or Holi and saying it is evil. So this is very mainstream. So now when you push your children, you tell them school is the most important thing in the world, and this is the only thing there is in the world. I mean, how? And you also tell them these guys are leftists, don't listen to them. Which one are they going to choose?
Yeah, you cannot tell them to selectively choose that. Yes, listen to your math teacher, but don't listen to your English or social science teacher.
Well, your math teacher and science teacher, like you said.
Actually, you're right. Your math and science teacher are also the same. They're not ideologically.
But it's the same because, and this is what I'll tell you, because Hindus have not created a culture of protest and activism, right? Because, how do you change things if you're a conservative,
Yeah.
On the one hand, you take this, Western right-wing copycat approach where we should not be protesting, we should not be doing all this. And then how are you going to change things? I mean, every group in America, if you know a little bit of immigration history, has gone through the process of speaking up and taking this. And we started to do it, right? The textbook issue was a great start. I mean, children went and came. But again, there's been no follow-up. There's no documentary made of it. Because everybody now thinks that what they did was, oh my God, maybe that was disreputable. I mean, just imagine if on your college CV you say, like, when I was in 5th grade, I went to Sacramento and I spoke out against these racist textbooks. You'll get your admission, not the same old, I volunteered and I did spelling bee, No, I need to think ahead,
Yeah. No, but I think parents also not realizing it, like I said, and your analysis, I bring it back again, is in 6th grade textbook in California today, they're teaching Aryan invasion theory. They're talking about Aryan priests, the entire stereotyping of Hinduism, caste system, etc., is all there. So, if you don't speak up and stand up, this is basically what your kids' brains are getting filled with, whether you like it or not. But I want to explore even the activist angle a little bit, right? Like, for me, what is fascinating is this, that's even within this, some of the children that we know, the Black BLM, the Black Lives Matter is a great thing, is a very stirring thing for them. And many of them do want to say something or do something, and quite rightfully so. I completely agree that what is happening to what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis was a travesty of justice, very, very unfair, and nobody should have to die like that. And yes, I would always stand up for people's human rights like that. What was fascinating though, when I was in some discussions with some of the kids and their parents about this, literally, except the people who lived in Sugar Land, Texas or Houston, Texas, who knew about this, but just in November, there was a Sikh cop who was on his job, who was a model sort of cop, very well reputed. He stopped somebody on a normal traffic stop, and that person shot him dead. Like a great cop with a family man, brilliant, spotless track record, a first turban Sikh in the Houston Police Department. And I said, I completely support you for George Floyd, but why is it that you don't, except for those who live in Houston, you don't even know about the existence of this story? And what is it? Why is it that you are not standing up for that person, or are you standing up only for causes that you're being told by the media are the sort of approved causes that you should stand up for? But when something like this happens to people of your own community, you're nowhere to be found.
Yeah, see, it's a very difficult thing because, again, this is where the anti-Hinduphobia activism on the internet and so on has painted itself into a corner, right? Because when we should be being expansive, right? Because as Hindus, we don't really have an agenda about fighting in a tribal sense. You know, we're not monotheists, you know, so we don't have this whole thing about, you know, saying, you know, one person's pain is more or less than the others, you know. So for us, spiritually, it is all lives matter, even, you know, insects and animals and so on. But unfortunately, we live in a very skewed communication sphere where even if you say that, people are going to say, oh my God, you're saying, you know, you just said an insect is more, you know, important than, you know, an approved identity victim, etc. You know. So I think the way to engage with this, and again, I wrote something on this on Facebook, which I shared, because unfortunately what's happened is I think a lot of Hindus see the hypocrisy, the selectiveness of this, but they don't have the language to talk about it. They don't have the discipline to engage it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's a very simple solution, really, you know, like what you just said, you know, start by respecting the premise of the current situation where thousands of people are going out on the streets, and they're getting beaten, they're getting tear gassed, because they are fed up. You know, they've seen this happen to black people so many times.
Yeah.
So we acknowledge that reality, and then we can also acknowledge the reality that there are powerful forces riding on the back of this, and there's also all sorts of ugly things happening where innocent bystanders are getting beaten up, where sometimes, like the Sikh policemen, they have suffered, and you know, we need to talk about both. And I actually wanted to show you, before I forget, this very interesting book. It's a really beautiful book. It's a compilation of radical children's literature, you know, in the US. Okay? Now, I know, again, when you look at it, you think this is quaint and this is just some families, but this is now the dominant mainstream, you know, in America. I think it's actually ASTEM, you know, or SJSTEM. That's what your children are learning. So most groups are very smart because they know that every child is now going to hold a placard and fight for social justice. So they've got their names in there. They've got Islamophobia. They've got their, you know, whatever names that need to be said over there, right?
Yeah.
But we are so much behind, despite, again, being a successful community and so on. So one practical thing I wanted to say, actually, I wanted to use this book as an example.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it. It's a very popular book. It was in every store in India.
No, what is it?
It's called The Vedas and Upanishads for Children.
Okay.
By Rupa Pai, and she has written a book before this called Gita for Children, and it's got a very nice, you know, chatty, informal style, and you know, I think it's quite a bestseller. It's a mainstream publisher. It's well marketed and so on. Beautifully designed. See, this is what professional publishers do. They bring so much value to a book, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely experience, but unfortunately, what happens is every few pages you realize this book is normalizing the whole Aryan invasion narrative.
Yeah. No,
so you have people like this now, and this is what is going on in school, and this is what happens in colleges too. And this is the reality of the Black Lives Movement as well, where you have some truths deeply entwined with falsehoods and colonial...
Basically agenda peddling, disguised, peddling their agenda and narrative wrapped in that partial truths.
Yeah, but again, you know, so when we say their agenda and all that, we are painting ourselves to be fringe people, you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so let's just say, look, you need to decolonize further. You've written some beautiful things here. You need to decolonize further. Black Lives Matter, yes, of course. At this moment, we won't even say all lives matter because it's your protest. But you also need to understand that, when a Sikh policeman is killed, or when Sikhs are killed in Afghanistan, why is this Islamophobia stuff not being called into question at times like that? The massacres of Sikhs in Afghanistan.
Or Hindus being killed every day in Pakistan and Bangladesh.
And what are these unholy, untruthful equations that are being made between Muslims in India and blacks in America? Blacks didn't, enslave and massacre people here for 1,000 years. So that's what I'm saying. I think we are in a time we need microsurgeons. Every Hindu student starts to be an intellectual microsurgeon. Everything is mixed up now.
Yeah, fascinating. You know what? We're almost an hour and 20 minutes time, so this will be the last question. And I know we've barely covered even half of what we wanted to cover, so we'll certainly have a follow-up interview. But the last question is this: where does this leave us in terms of Hindu parents here? What is the big, broad vision? What are we, apart? Like, let's say we want to move away from this narrow idea of, kids going for SATs and getting to Ivy Leagues and turning engineers and doctors. Where, does parenting begin and end with parents getting just kids through school and college? Or is there some big idea for Hinduism and the world families can bond on? I mean, if you look at other religions, they have a very clear way of creating a cohesive community through their established norms and practices, whether it's get together on Fridays or Sundays and listen to your priest and cohere as a community, and you are there for your religion, and your purpose is your vision is to advance the cause of your religion or whatever. We simply don't have that. So, what is our big vision for greater good and for ourselves and our future that parents need to have in doing a good job of raising their children?
Wonderful question. So, see, it's very simple. I think we need to map out the world in terms of the big world stories, out there today, and recognize that as Hindus, we are now just consumers of other people's stories. We are not storytellers anymore, and we are, and we are quickly also falling out of being practitioners where we can even tell stories. I think till our parents' generation, maybe we didn't tell stories, we didn't have the power to tell stories globally, but we still had the experiences, right? We grew up in Indian villages, you grew up in Gujarati medium, which is a whole universe. We grew up going to temples, having huge festivals, having grandparents. Now that has been severed. Mm-hmm. Like, our generation of parenting is seriously lacking even the experience. We have maybe 1 or 2 hours of a temple visit on Sunday, and that's about it. Very, very little sensorial inputs even coming in, and which is where Agastya Gurukulam's daily regimen is very, very useful, teaching all these things practically, because you have to put your body and your time into all of this. Now, in terms of the world vision, see, it's very interesting. Ask if you see a devout Muslim or a Christian, or maybe even a Jew, do you think the world would be a better place because of your religion? They're very confident. They'll say, yeah, Some of them may be very fundamentalist. They say, yeah, of course, so you better convert. Some of them may not be fundamentalist, but, they have that belief, that sense that their culture, their tradition.
Yeah, even Richard Dawkins says, I'm culturally Christian. The world's most best-known atheist who is going after religion every day. He's like, I'm culturally Christian. I celebrate Christmas because the world is a better place for that.
So, exactly. And then you have the secular atheists and so on, and they also have this sort of idea that, like Dawkins and everybody else. Now, all of them have, of course, participated in the construction of this dominant narrative today that, Hinduism needs to be eviscerated, appropriated, demonized, etc., because this is not a fringe group. Again, where things are heading in America, let me tell you one more thing about Hinduphobia, the trajectory. If you go back to the 2016 California textbooks, and so many Hindu parents and scholars and activists fought very hard, We got some improvements in the textbooks then, but the story that was advanced by the other side, the South Asian activists and professors, that has traveled 1,000 times further than our position, because the Hindu community went silent. We have not been able to do anything after that. The other side now, for example, is on every campus, speaking with very, very respected scholars, and they are being cheerleaded in mainstream American media, and a lot of Indian parents don't even see that coming, and so they've been made the new normal. Anyway, so I don't want to end on the Hinduphobia note, so I'll go back to your idea of a greater vision for Hinduism. So right now, what I see happening with Hindu parents is, the idea basically is most of us have sort of bought into this idea that we live in a modern, secular, liberal world where it's fine to erase our Hinduism because everybody else is sort of doing that too and things like that. So at best, Hinduism means be a good person, be a good person, and
it's so far from the truth and reality. If anything, the reality is the opposite.
Yeah. Now the irony is, you actually, beyond this Hinduphobia and academia and all that, I have to share one story. I had the most inspiring conversation like this on Zoom 2 or 3 weeks ago with an American YouTuber, and I felt more thrilled about this than any BBC or CNN or whatever, all the big media. So this was a small YouTube channel with about 50 or 100 followers. It's called The Beer Experience with Carlos. Mm-hmm. Carlos is a sanitation worker, in California. Mm. He's a guy who picks up garbage once a week. And he has a YouTube channel, and he's just calling people because he wants to know things. Politics, spirituality, and it's on YouTube, and it should be on my Twitter or Facebook page. I'll also share it. So Carlos knows nothing about Hinduism, but he wants to know. And he asked me, because, he's also a Tulsi Gabbard fan, and so he was very curious about it. And I was talking to him about Hinduphobia, and you know what? He lost interest because he said, I have to tell you, I don't know, I'm very sorry that there's all this bad things being said about you guys. But, the average person, people like me, we think of what you guys say as good stuff because you guys don't go around trying to convert and kill people, And then you look at pop culture, that video that we made recently, the Beatles, George Harrison, Hare Krishna, the hippies, Allen Ginsberg, there is so much passion among creative people all around the world from Hinduism. It's, that's why we need to get away from this sort of very modern, bureaucratic, corporate soul. We don't need Hinduism for corporate soul, because corporate and soul are, I'm sorry, corporate is just a job, it's not a soul.
Yeah.
We need the Hinduism for the world soul, which is aching, and that's where it's going to come. 2-3 books I want to show you, specifically for Hindu parents, because you were going to ask me the question of what is my vision for my own Nalanda or Vijayanagara, and
we're not going to get to that. We will have a second interview, though.
But I'll just show you these books in the last minute that we have. I would like Hindu parents to take charge of this. It's not organizations or governments. Nobody else is going to start this revolution. You have to start the revolution with the real revolutionaries, with the rebel kids of tomorrow, your own children, okay? So don't let them become somebody else's, rebels. Let them be rebels for Dharma. That's the coolest thing there is. For that, I'll just show you 2-3 books. Parents of slightly younger children, please take a look at this book, How to Behave and Why by Monroe Leaf. It's a small children's book. Just get it. I mean, even if you don't have kids or your kids are already in college, read this book because this is the one thing we didn't really have. I mean, we got a little bit of it from Amar Chitragada, but this is, small stories about about cause and effect, about karma. See, the reason Hinduism is not an ism and just, philosophy is because, we're just talking about, what goes around comes back at you. Everything is based on that. We're not premised on in all kinds of crazy beliefs. So how to behave and why? Because it tells you what happens if you tell a lie or you steal. Simple as that, And I think for children, this is the kind of logical thinking people in the real world we need to encourage. These 2 books, John Holt was sort of a pioneer and visionary in the American unschooling movement. And this book, I just got it yesterday, I haven't read it yet, dumbing us down the hidden curriculum of compulsory schooling. Okay, so I know there's a lot of people who are interested in homeschooling who are here as well. And what I would like you to know is, ask yourself the simple question, just as how your understanding and practice of parenting came about at a certain time in history, it is shaped by forces like marketing companies, by consumer good makers who are trying to get to your purse through your children, through your anxieties about parenting. Ask yourself the question of where this modern school system started. Where did the Gurukula system end in the case of India? Where did the Native American family community schooling end? I mean, Native American children were sent off forcibly to boarding schools where their hair was cut off. They were punished for speaking their languages. There's a lot of movies on the internet about Native American boarding schools. It's traumatic. Okay, so ask yourself this question about where the modern factory schooling system came from, and is it really making your children smart and competitive, or are you just buying that myth? Because maybe they'll still get to Stanford without going to the factory school. And I'm not just making it up. I believe there's an Agastya curriculum mom who has shown us it is possible, right? So,
yeah. Siddharth, a very bright young boy who's at Stanford now, who was homeschooled in India. Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, that's why I said more than the cost of my activism and truth speaking, it's the reward that counts. And, so our children are going to create this vision and meaning that everyone from, Carlos, who's taking your garbage, to Tulsi, who's going to be president, to everybody is going to appreciate what we have if we get over our own limitations right now. And I think the factory school, competitiveness, superficial appearances stuff, it's not Hindu, it's not cool. So let's just go back to what our, rishis and ancestors taught us. Let's focus on our children, our parents, the knowledge within, and we'll make a beautiful world.
I could not have put it better. Thank you. So make cool rebels for Dharma, parents. That's the bottom line. And we'll end with that. So thank you so much, Vamsee. Like I said, it is such a pleasure, honor, and privilege to have you with us today. We have lots and lots more to talk about, and I'm sure we will be chatting with you again in the future. So thank you all. Thanks for staying with us for this long, and have a good rest of the day and have a good weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.